Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good year blimp, and welcome to the madness that is the Charlie Marx Show. I'm Charlie Marx, and I have a sworn affidavit from my lawyer to prove it. If you're enjoying the Charlie Marx Show, then please like, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, and follow the Charlie Marx Show. Also, please share, as sharing is daring. You can also leave me a comment, or why not join the show by sharing a problem with viewers' letters, or tell me what's bugging you in the world with the devil's advocate. I can also be spied upon by you visiting www.charliemarx.co.uk. What with all that's going on in the world, I thought it might be appropriate to mention that one of my goldfish committed suicide. I can't go into details as the whole sordid thing is being investigated by police who don't believe Goldie was that depressed. Suffice to say, I may be doing the next show from prison. Coming up on tonight's show, we have viewers' letter, plus all the fake news from around the world and beyond from the CM Newsroom, plus our not-so-special guest, plus Storytime with Sir Percival Homosexual reading the romantic drama 97 Years Young, and of course moans and groans and things that go irk in the night with the devil's advocate. It's been an interesting week, what with me getting to season 3 of The Next Generation. My producer Fiona has also informed me that if I don't become funnier, she is going to take her production skills to a South Korean prison where the shows there are apparently just hilarious. And now, before all the insanity which is the Charlie Marx Show, a quick word from our sponsor.
Tired of being tired? Then get some sleep.
Thank you to our sponsor. Later in the show we have our not so special guest, but first let's see if we can help one of our viewers with a problem only the Charlie Marx Show can solve in Viewer's Letter. This week's Viewer's Letter comes from someone I have never met in my life, no matter what she says or indeed what video proof she may have in an old suitcase under her bed. It reads, "Hi Charlie, remember me? Nope, don't know you in the slightest. It's Judy Boody." Oh my goodness, there's probably a million Judy Boodies in the street alone. "It's been a while since I spoke to you." I would have to say it's been never that you spoke to me because we don't know each other. I was hoping that you would have been in touch after that night The next bit is too blurry to read. Anyway, as I'm now a 24-year-old beautiful model, actually I wouldn't know seeing as I've never met you, but going by your mental state, I'd concur that you are probably a model for Airfix. The reason I'm writing to you is firstly to prove that I can write, seeing as you said I probably couldn't. Never said that. And secondly, I think that late last Wednesday I was abducted by aliens in a club and probed. Well, I can't even remember your name, Judy Boody, but I was recording the show last Wednesday night and Fiona, my producer, was paid a lot of money to give me an alibi. So, tune in next time for another Viewer's Letter. So, what's the Charlie Marx show? Welcome back, lovies and darlings. You're watching the Charlie Marx show. Coming up, our not-so-special guest, Storytime, and of course the Devil's Advocate. But before all that, it's time to get a roundup of the latest fake news from around the world and beyond with CM News. Good evening and welcome to CM News with me, Bette Davis. Our top story tonight. Greece has now fully recovered from their recession. The Greek finance minister said that they were back in business after claiming back their PPI. Commissioner of Police Peter Peterson is to give a serious talk to children in primary schools about the dangers of bullying. This comes only 1 week after 2 police officers from the same constabulary were mugged by a gang of youths at St Augustine's Primary School in Glasgow. Tennis now. And the Hungarian number 4, Jakub Skóravala-Nowarychka-Oinski, was narrowly defeated by his name not fitting on the scoreboard. Movie news now. Quentin Tarantino has released his most controversial film in decades. It revolves around a group of men trying to break into a bank. They are Mr. Country Club, Mr. Gold Visa, Mr. Porsche, Mr. Dinner at the Savoy, and Mr. Holidays in Barbados. Reservoir Snobs is out on Monday. Mr. Henry Henderson, the man who did nothing his entire life, has passed away at the age of 105. Doctors believe he died of boredom. And finally, it was absolute pandemonium during the filming of this Sunday's Antiques Roadshow, as Mrs. Murgatroyd went mental when she presented expert Hubert Plimsoll with what she thought was Anne Frank's laptop. Hubert Plimsoll remarked that it was a forgery, seeing as it operated on Windows 46, and if it had been authentic, it would have been Windows 45. Mrs. Murgatroyd will appear before Judge Jeremiah Clafferty next month on the charge of assaulting an Antiques Roadshow expert with a forged laptop. And that was the latest headlines. This is Bette Davis for CM News. Good night. Thank you, Bette. More from the CM Newsroom next time. But now, my not-so-special guest. My guest this evening is a controversial priest known for his beliefs in a big man who lives in the sky. Joining us from satellite, please welcome Father O'Reilly. Welcome to the show, Father.
Thank you.
You're here to talk about the New Testament, and
I'm here to talk about the evils in the modern world and how far astray people have gone from Jesus' teachings.
Right. Well, maybe I can start by asking what you believe the evils in the world are.
Are you for real? Just look out your window and you'll see evil all over the place. Even a blind man with no head could see the evil in the world.
Well, for the sake of the blind, headless people who can't see the evils in the world, can you elaborate on what you see as evil?
Of course I can. Look at the young ones blaspheming all over the place. Look at people fornicating out of marriage, and those who buy a Tesla. Need I go on? There are laws, and their laws have been given by God to keep us on the right path. Why do you think he gave us the 10 Commandments? For a laugh? No, what we need is a good old-fashioned apocalypse.
Is that not a bit final?
Oh, jeez, wipe out the rubbish from the world, that's what I say.
Let's move on, shall we, to discuss the main character in the New Testament.
Jesus Christ.
Yes, him.
What?
Jesus Christ.
What are you dribbling on about, you moron? I just dropped my phone. Anyway, all the wondrous things Jesus did. He'd turn in his tomb if he knew what was going on today. If Jesus were alive today, he'd be like a Liam Neeson vigilante going after the scum of the earth.
I'm afraid that job's taken. Let's talk about the life of Jesus, as I find it interesting that the New Testament is all about his life, his work, his ascension to heaven to sit by the hand of God, which doesn't sound very comfortable, and of course his hobbies. And yet there is not a mention of him in any history textbook. Why is that?
I'll tell you why that is, shall I? It's because most historians are they're all foreigners, and nothing good ever comes from foreigners from foreign lands.
Wasn't Jesus a foreigner?
Ah, but he spoke English like us. You look at the films that have been made about Jesus, and in every one his English is perfect.
What about the Mel Gibson movie?
How the hell can you compare Jesus to Mad Max?
Okay, getting back to the question of Jesus not appearing in any historical books.
Well, who are you going to believe? A book by John, Paul, Luke and Ringo? Or a book by historians with proof?
I never thought about it like that. Jesus only started believing he was the Messiah later on in his life. Why do you think that was?
Look, when Jesus was born, he was only a baby. So he was going to have his face in his iPad. You're getting ahead of yourself here. Don't forget, Herod's advisors told him about the Son of God being born, but ended the sentence with, "Give him his due." And Herod thought they were planning a present for him. Then, with Herod wanting to give baby Jesus a kicking, Mary and Joseph and the kid had fleas in Egypt. They had to flee to Egypt. Matthew 2:13.
But they ended up going home again?
Better hut prices. But you're quite right. They did that. And Jesus worked with his father as a carpenter. They would tour the local inns singing Top of the World, Rainy Days and Mondays and Close to You. Matthew 13:55, Mark 6:3 and Luke Skywalker.
But was Jesus really the Messiah?
Of course he was, you ignoramus. He did his one-man show on the Mount, spent 40 days in the wilderness, but soon left Birmingham to return to his homeland to pick 12 pals for their local football team, Nazareth FC. He lifted the window because of the sun. He raised a widow's son, feeds 5,000 and only spends 17.39 in Lidl, getting 32 points in Come Dine With Me. He gets crucified when Roman soldiers get confused when Jesus asks for directions to Charing Cross. And he came back from the dead. I think that more than qualifies him to be the Messiah.
What would you say to the accusation that the New Testament is very anti-homosexual?
That's not true at all. Haven't you noticed that all the men wore dresses?
I think they were robes.
I don't know what shop robes is, but what I can tell you is the New Testament is certainly not anti-homosexual. And I know this because homosexuality was only invented in the 1980s by the Bee Gees.
And what is your view on the popular belief that Jesus married Mary Magdalene and they had children?
Of course, Jesus didn't have a serious relationship with Mary Magdalene, nor did he have kids. Jesus was a good-looking man with a very fashionable beard and probably had lots of women after him. He'd never have given that up.
My final question for you is, do you think Christmas has lost its meaning?
Do we still get presents and lots of food and booze?
I believe we do.
Then, no.
Well, that's all we have time for, but I'm sure you'll be back again for more fairy tales. Ladies and gentlemen, Father O'Reilly. Join me next time when our guest of the show will be someone in rehab. But now it's time to slip into your pyjamas, get your cosy blanket, throw another weasel in the fire and curl up in the sofa with a nice glass of wine as Sir Percival Homosexual reads this week's tale of romantic drama, 97 Years Young, in Storytime.
Hello, children, and those men who collect toys, and welcome to Storytime. Tonight's tale is a poignant story all the way from outer Mongolia and translated into English by Mrs. Parker, my next-door neighbour, titled 97 Years Young. Are you sitting comfortably with your little spliff in your hobnobs? Then we'll begin. Norman Normanson was 93 years old and he'd never been in love. His mother had been killed 2 years before Norman was born when she fell out of a plane. And his father, who invented the power-busting lavatory flush system, had been sucked into oblivion, never to be seen from again. Norman was brought up with his grandparents, whom he lives with to this day. Sadly, they never really communicated with Norman, as they had died the day he moved in. Norman's grandparents were exceptionally strict devil worshippers and encouraged their grandson to stay away from strange women and to concentrate on his school studies of sacrifice, witchcraft and home economics. Norman only wanted to please his grandparents, so he did as they said, to the detriment that he never met any girls, although he could make a fairly lovely apple pie. The years drifted past aimlessly, with Norman trying to forget all about girls. He did this mostly by learning the tuba and having cold showers. The hardest part about this was getting the tuba into the shower. Sitting one day in his bedroom, shortly after his 93rd birthday, he decided that he'd waited long enough to meet a woman of the opposite sex, and he went through to have a serious conversation with his grandparents. He brushed the cobwebs from his grandparents' skeletal faces and nervously stammered his way through the question he most wanted to ask. "Grandparents, I am 93 years old, and I think I would like to. Please, can I go on a date?" To Norman's amazement, there was no arguments, no raised voices, no breathing whatsoever. Finally, they must have relented, and now he would be free to date. Norman rushed excitedly back to his bedroom, and 3/4 of an hour later he was there. He wondered how a man of his mature age would go about dating. Suddenly, out of the corner of his one good eye, he noticed in the corner of the room a newspaper lying open at the dating page. Norman picked up the newspaper in his arthritic hands and gazed over the dating column to see how this whole dating thing worked. He started to read. 24-year-old money grabber would like to meet rich man with weak heart. Must like fast carnival rides and horror movies. Norman knew he wasn't rich, as the only money he received was from the Unemployment Benefits Office, who were challenging his case because they believed he could have been actively seeking work for the past 76 years, and his excuse of, "I have a bad cold," was wearing a little thin. He continued to read the dating column. Karaoke diva would like to meet man who sits in a corner and cheers for me, even though I couldn't carry a tune if I had it in a rucksack. Norman sat back. This woman wasn't for him either. It was useless. He was just about to give up and become a priest, for at least then he would have an active sex life, when he noticed a small blurred advert right at the bottom of the page. He read, 97 years young, seeking a toy boy with a good sense of... can't remember. Oh, and who doesn't mind the odd trumpet sneaking out. Norman's eyes filled with tears of joy and glaucoma. This was it. This was what he'd been searching for. She was the perfect woman, and of course he didn't mind her trumpeting. With his tuba they could make sweet music together. They were a match made in a twee tea room, and what with him being 94, he fitted her criteria of him being a boy toy perfectly. This woman was much more than perfect. She was all right. Norman sat in his chair and lifted a piece of paper and a crayon. His grandparents, never allowed pencils in case he injured himself. He sat staring at the blank page for some time. First words were so vital, he thought to himself, but what would he write? He had to impress her with words, but what words? He looked through some more adverts just for advice. Bloke looking for bird to show off to pals in pub. That seemed a little condensed for what Norman wanted to say. He read on. Male 46 would like to meet nurse 24 who brings her uniform home with her. Norman had seen enough nurses in his life. He read further still. Sexy man would like to meet sexy woman for sexy time. To be completely honest, I'm not sexy in the slightest, and the fact that I have to write in to a Lonely Hearts column only goes to show that I am a complete failure. So much so that I'm going to take my own life on Sunday. However, I'm free on Saturday night. Norman admired this man's honesty, but after reading more ads, he decided to let his crane flow across the page and let fate take its natural course. Dear 97 years young, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Norman Normanson, and I have been searching my entire 94-year life to find someone like you. Even better that I found an actual you. I can tell from the beautiful, delicate, romantic words that you wrote in your advert that you're a very romantic lady, like me, although I'm not a lady. I do not want to say too much right now, as I think it would be better to speak the words I feel in person. I will say, however, because however is my favourite word. I have spent too many years alone, so I believe in taking chances. And this is why I will not wait for your reply. Instead, I shall put my faith in destiny and book us a table at Mr. Singh's authentic Italian restaurant for Saturday night at 7 p.m. I wait with bated breath and arrhythmia to hear every detail of your life. Yours forever, Norman Normanson. Norman placed the letter inside an envelope and, taking out his teeth, licked it closed. Not as agile as he'd once been, he grabbed his walking stick and headed to the post box. When he got there, it was late. He kissed the envelope for luck and posted his future destiny through the slot. It was Wednesday when he posted the letter, and the countdown had begun until his date on Saturday at 7 p.m. with 97 years young. Short of cash, Norman decided to place an advert in the window of the village shop to sell his family's prized possessions. A driver arrived at his door the following morning and asked Norman how much he wanted for the mass of stuff. Norman replied that he wanted no less than £9,000. After a little negotiation, the van driver left with a packed van, and Norman kissed the £10 note the van driver had given him. Still short of cash, Norman went to his bank and took out his entire savings. It had taken him decades to save that much, but 97 years young was worth every penny of the £22.50. As he was leaving the bank, he noticed his reflection in the window, and he became disheartened. How could he show up at a fancy restaurant to meet 97 years young, looking like he did? Norman needed a makeover, but money was as tight as the elastic on his Y-fronts. He'd sold everything, and the only thing he had left was the fabulous Boris Johnson at the Wurlitzer album. He decided to sell it, but then remembered that he didn't actually have the album, as it was only a dream. He pondered on how to come up with some money. Would breaking the law be worth it to impress 97 years young? Norman entered the gents' outfitters, took a bundle of clothes into the changing room, dumping his old clothes in the bin, and exited the shop. Little did he know that the security cameras saw everything, and in exactly 1 week's time he would be brought up before a judge and sentenced to absolute death. The days crept by like his life had, slowly and boring, and even though it was Thursday, he'd booked the restaurant, had his annual bath, and was dressed for the date in his stolen attire. The clock on the wall seemed to be taking forever to move, and every tick and every talk was deafening. Of course, he blamed his grandfather for buying a 50-foot clock. Norman decided to show his skeletal grandparents his new suit, but the reaction of not moving spoke volumes. Norman, disheartened, exited their room and suddenly thought that it was perhaps time he moved out and got a place of his own. Suddenly the time arrived and he stood at the front door ready to make his way to meet his destiny. Still concerned about his finances, he decided to walk the 18 miles to the restaurant rather than squander the £1.65 on bus fare. He began the long walk knowing every step brought him closer to love. Of course, he had to leave a little earlier than planned, but it was a lovely Thursday evening and only forecast for torrential storms for a few hours. Saturday arrived and Norman sat on a bench outside the restaurant. It was early in the morning, and as the time moved ever so slowly towards the date, Norman's heart was beating faster than ever. This was probably due to a slight default in his pacemaker, but that's what you get for buying a pacemaker off eBay. A quick look at his antique pocket watch informed him that it was time to head back to the restaurant. Norman had never been that keen on the design of the pocket watch, which was just as well as a group of young hoodlums that had been hanging around mugged him for it. 7 o'clock came and went with Norman patiently waiting inside the restaurant. Of course she would show up, as it was written in their stars. But as the clock struck 9, Norman wondered if the waiters were conscious about him having sat for 2 hours without ordering anything. Every time the door opened, Norman's head would spin around, hoping to see his love. Of course, he would have stood a better chance if he weren't looking at the bathroom door. At 13 minutes past 10, Norman was beginning to feel a little anxious. What if she didn't get his letter? He knew how unreliable the post office were, especially if you didn't put a stamp on your letter. What if she'd met someone? She was articulate in her writing of the ad, and what man wouldn't want to hear her trumpet? Maybe she'd been on a few bad dates and had given up on men to become a librarian. Norman closed his eyes, feeling sad. Suddenly, he felt a tap on his shoulder. When he turned, he saw a beautiful blonde lady who looked like she could be no more than 87 years old. She removed the tap from his shoulder and apologised for being late. Norman was speechless. Then he stood from his seat, gesturing to the seat in front of him. "Think nothing of it," he said with a shaky voice. The woman looked at him. There was an accident on the motorway, as a bus had to swerve to miss this idiot walking down the centre lane. But I'm here now, Alfred. As Norman smiled lower, an old man sitting in the corner of the restaurant shouted to the woman, "I'm Alfred," and she left. Norman sat alone as another hour drifted past. What if she'd been in an accident? She could have been killed, or worse. As the last of the customers exited the restaurant and the waiters began getting changed into their pyjamas, the manager approached Norman's table. "We have to close, sir." Norman looked at him with pity in his eyes. "Can I not just sit here for 5 more minutes?" he pleaded. The manager felt sorry for Norman, but decided to kick him out anyway. Norman stood outside the restaurant in the pouring rain, not understanding what had gone so wrong. He reached into his pocket and brought out the newspaper page, which had the dating columns on it, to see if he could decipher some kind of clue as to why she had not turned up. There was nothing. Norman walked away from the restaurant, knowing that because he never ordered anything, Burger King were never going to allow him to come back. Norman stood in a doorway sheltering from the rain. Why? He asked himself 3 times. He took out the paper again and looked at it. He was about to rip it up and throw it away when he noticed something that made his frown turn around. The date in the paper was 1936. How stupid of him! How idiotic he'd been! His date would now be at least 167 years old, and of course it would take her longer to get there. He laughed, then returned to the bench, hoping that she wouldn't be that much longer so they could catch the chip shop before it closed.
Wow, that was long. And Sir Percival will be back next time with another load of words in Storytime. But now, it's time for another roundup of moans and groans in The Devil's Advocate. Tonight on The Devil's Advocate, I have to start by saying that the world has finally gone completely nuts. But you knew that already, didn't you? Tonight's moan is titled, "There's Something Wrong with the PC." We are delving deep into something that bugs me beyond words. But seeing as I need to use words to communicate with you, I shall endeavour to try my best. Now, this is not a new moan, as this PC nonsense has been about since before I was a multi-millionaire Tony Award-winning writer and profound liar. Forgetting that, of course, people survived the human race for thousands of years without the PC brigade sticking their 2 cents in. But suddenly, with the introduction of the 21st century, we now have to watch what we say, what we do, and how we think. It all starts in childhood. We are now told that we cannot reprimand children, let alone batter them, when they have done something wrong, because it will lower their self-esteem and mental well-being. Really? My mother used to chase me with her slipper, but I never turned out barefooted. A parent can and will face prosecution if they shout at their children, and they could possibly face death if a smack on the bottom were applied. The purveyors of the PC laws have got it into their unbelievable stupid minds that not punishing a child will make them a better type of adult. Wrong! And children are smarter than you think. So when the child realises that you are too afraid to punish them because of the consequences, they will make the most of any bad situation. Sure, most kids will push the boundaries, but some of them are now in the position of getting rid of the boundaries altogether and creating their own rules, or lack of them. They are now in control. So if the PC idiots have it right, then there will be more children helping old ladies across the road. There will be more children saying, "No, mother, I have way too many toys as it is." There will be no children sitting with those things we used to see, books, I think they were called. This is what actually happens. Mum has just finished work and picked her little adorable boy up from school. She's a little late because of the traffic and he's not happy. She has to buy something from the supermarket for the family dinner, and as she skates around the store like the General Lee with little boy Blue in the trolley, she accidentally finds herself in aisle 24, the confectionery aisle. She tries to get out without her golden boy realising where they are, but it's too late, and he spots the sweet treats which are perfectly laid out in temptation. He then points to the treats and tells her, "Fill the trolley now, mother." She says that Mummy doesn't have enough money for sweets and food, as she was just made redundant, and the old folks' home is throwing Grandad out in the street if the last bill of £2,500 is not paid. The little cherub doesn't think she's making a convincing enough argument and throws a wobbler. Everyone is now looking at the bad mother who's depriving her child of a little treat. And just to get out alive, she reneges on her promise not to give the 6-year-old control of the family's life. She buys him what he wants. So did this help the child? Well, the child finally leaves school in second year with only their school bag, and after taking a year out from nothing, they will try and get a job. But they can't be bothered working for a full 5 days, so they'll want to sort that out with the boss. They'll also want 8 weeks off in the summer because, well, that's what they're used to. And they'll throw themselves on the floor in a tantrum if you offer the McTaggart account with the extra bonus to Taylor, who is much more qualified and is able to succeed. The boss gives in to the spoiled brat, but Taylor bides his time and one night deliberately pushes your baby off a cliff. You could have quite easily avoided your child's death if you had only stuck to your guns and not bought him the sweets in the supermarket. This PC nonsense has now encroached into the schools. So even if parents want to bring their children up with rules and regulations and, what's that thing? Normality, it's getting more and more difficult. Billy and Johnny play together in the playground every day. Billy sees his friend Johnny and Johnny sees his friend Billy. PC grown-ups want to explain to Billy that Johnny is black and that Billy is yellow. Why can't these people just let the children play with the paints? Teachers now have a hard time because they have to learn the old nursery rhymes all over again. Georgie Porgy, pudding and pie, kissed the girls and made them cry. When the boys came out to play, Georgie Porgy ran away. But now Georgie Porgy is no longer allowed to kiss girls, as this is seen as sexual harassment. And then the boys who came out to stick up for the girls by giving Georgie a good kicking are no longer heroes but bullies, and bullying will not be tolerated. Ba, ba, black sheep, have you any wool? This has been changed to ba, ba, woolly sheep, have you any wool? Of course it has wool. You just called it a woolly sheep. Hush-a-bye, baby, on the tree top. When the wind blows, the cradle will rock. When the bough breaks, the cradle will fall, and down will come baby, cradle and all. By erasing this nursery rhyme from history, you are apparently protecting children from the realistic abuse that some parents would put their children up in trees whilst they go out to the pub. Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water. This has been removed due to inferences on child labour. Jack, be nimble. Jack, be quick. Jack jumped over the candlestick. Now Jack might be nimble, and Jack may indeed be quick, but thanks to the PC health and safety mob, Jack will no longer be able to jump a queue, let alone a candlestick. The problem with being PC is that it doesn't always stick to its own rules. They say it's important to encourage risky play, but then reduce the risk by taking away the risk. Surely we should want children to have the odd little accident to teach them to be more careful in the future. Anyway, back to the rhymes. Mary, Mary, quite contrary, how does your garden grow? With horse crap. Simple Simon, who met the pieman, is no longer allowed to be called Simple Simon. His new name is Additional Needs Simon. The three blind mice are now the three visually challenged mice, and wee Willie Winky has been put on our register. But it gets even better. Do you know that if a burglar breaks into your house and you defend your property and your family, and you wound the burglar, then he or she can sue you for assault and seek compensation for loss of earnings? Jokes. The Jewish person can tell a Jewish joke, the black person can tell black jokes, the woman can make female jokes, and the gay person can make gay jokes. Nobody can make Muslim jokes, as nobody is that fed up with living. I have often wondered whatever happened to that black Jewish gay woman who told jokes. Soon stand-up comics will start the show by saying, "Nobody walks into a bar. Good night." And what will happen to our favourite musicians and their songs? Well, Man, I Feel Like a Woman by Shania Twain will become People, I Feel Like a Person. A Horse with No Name by America will become A Horse That Chooses Not to Be Called Anything because it has the God-given right to remain nameless. Billy Joel's Just the Way You Are becomes Just the Way You Are if it's okay with you and you're happy to be the way you are. Queen's Fat Bottom Girls becomes Another One Bites the Dust Part 2. Children of the Revolution by T-Rex becomes Young People with Rights. And Motley Crue will be locked in a room, never to be heard from again. We cannot celebrate Christmas the way this Christian country used to, just in case someone gets offended. Punch and Judy are now too violent. Richard and Judy are too awful. Poppies given out to remind us about those who fought in the Great War, with millions of soldiers dying in the most gruesome ways, don't have a pin anymore in case we jag ourselves. And children are no longer allowed to play conkers in school in case they cave each other's heads in. 80s classic sitcoms are being deleted or banned because they use language of the time. And so we not only lose great comedy, but we lose how people communicated historically in a comedy. As a writer, I'm finding it increasingly difficult to be realistic when trying to follow these PC rules, when all I want to do is make people laugh. This nonsense is killing theatre and stand-up. Celebrities are being cancelled quicker than they can offend. I'm deeply offended by those easily offended. Do I really need to change the language I was taught in school, college, university, because someone now wants to be known as something I never knew existed. Just get on with your life and I'll get on with mine. We can disagree on things. That's perfectly okay. It's human nature. Free speech has become locked up. So, getting back to this particular point in this episode of The Devil's Advocate, I'm finding it more and more annoying that my PC is continually running slow on Windows 11. Thank you for watching The Charlie Marx Show, and remember to like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications gently, share and follow me on www.charliemarx.co.uk. So, until next time, if you can't watch The Charlie Marx Show, then there's no point in having eyes.